They handed me the pink slip at exactly 8:01 a.m., like they'd rehearsed it with a metronome and a Xanax drip. HR was waiting in the lobby with that fake "we're all in this together" grin, the kind that usually precedes corporate yoga or mass layoffs. I didn't need coffee. I could feel the caffeine of pure rage pulsing through my veins. "Diane Mallory?" chirped the girl whose blazer still had a clearance tag hanging from the armpit. "Could we chat upstairs real quick?" Chat. Right. Like we were gonna braid each other's hair and cry about boys. I followed her up, my heels clicking on the linoleum like a countdown to detonation. The HR conference room smelled like stale bagels and toner, corporate death perfume. There were three of them, all young enough to list TikTok under skills on their resumes. One read from a paper like she was auditioning for community theater. "Due to organizational restructuring, your role has been made redundant, effective immediately. You are being terminated without cause. You will receive." "Stop," I said, holding up one finger, calm as a cat in a birdcage factory. "Print that for me." They blinked, clearly not expecting someone fired before breakfast to ask for receipts. "Of course," she stammered, tapping at the printer. "Thanks," I said, like I was ordering soup. I folded the paper, slid it into my leather folder, and smiled. "Good luck," I added, mostly to myself, because they were going to need it, more than they could possibly comprehend. And hey, quick sidebar before we go any deeper. If you're still listening and not already subscribed, take a second and hit that button. 97% of folks just tune in and vanish like middle management after a scandal. Help me reach my first ever 10,000 subscribers. I swear, the only thing I'll do with that milestone is pour another cup of coffee and tell more true chaos like this. Anyway, back to the implosion. I left the building like I'd just wrapped a business lunch, not like someone who'd been gutted by corporate Darwinism. Most people don't get to plan their own eulogy and encore. But I'm not most people. I'm Diane Mallory, and I've been waiting for this moment since the first pastel blazer waltzed in and called my department a little too analog for the new culture. I'd spent 19 years inside Swift Span Corp, watching the company grow from a regional logistics nothing burger into a household name, and then right back down into a private equity chew toy. I'd outlived 5 CFOs, 4 rebrands, and 1 sexual harassment scandal that got buried deeper than Jimmy Hoffa. But I knew my expiration date had been stamped the minute the acquisition went through. The new execs had buzzwords instead of plans. Synergy, recalibration, culture 2.0. It all translated to the same thing: purge the over 50 crowd and throw ping-pong tables at the morale problem. So, 6 months ago, when whispers of a sale drifted through the finance floor like mold in the air ducts, I didn't panic. I didn't cry in my car or schedule a panic mammogram like Barb from accounting. No, I got to work. Surgical, quiet, focused, because buried in a forgotten clause from a 10-year-old merger agreement sat my escape plan. Not just mine, theirs too. A legacy provision, half deleted from memory but still alive in ink and back-end files, waiting for someone smart and vindictive enough to notice. And now, on this gray Monday morning, the time bomb had started ticking. They thought they'd fired a compliance officer. What they actually did was trigger a chain reaction that was about to cost them millions. I took the long way home, coffee in hand, not because I needed the caffeine, but because I wanted to be comfortable when I watched the fallout. It started with a whisper, literally. 6 months ago, I was microwaving stale lasagna in the break room when Tyler from accounts slid in, looking like he'd just wet his khakis with nervous energy. Kid was fresh out of grad school, all teeth and caffeine. He leaned in and said, "Don't tell anyone I said this, but I overheard Jenny on the strategy team mention the word acquisition." He said it like it was a dirty word, like acquisition was code for Armageddon. And for people like me, legacy employees with high salaries and low tolerance for bullshit, that's exactly what it was. I gave him the kind of smile a blackjack dealer gives a drunk tourist about to split tens. "Thanks, kid." I didn't eat the lasagna. I didn't say another word. I walked straight back to my desk, logged into the company's ancient contract archive system, where files went to rot, and started digging like a coyote in a pet cemetery. The thing about being a senior compliance officer for nearly 2 decades, you don't just read policies, you remember them. You remember which mergers had hastily tacked on equity policies, which severance clauses got cut for budget, and which ones were buried under jargon so dense it could qualify as dark matter. Somewhere between my 3rd cup of gas station coffee and the 8th hour of scrolling obsolete PDFs, I found it. Appendix C Financial Risk Memo PDF. The file was dated 2013, back when Swift Span had swallowed a smaller West Coast logistics firm. Ghost of a merger, so quiet most of the C-suite didn't even remember it happened. But I remembered, because it was the first time I'd ever heard the phrase poison pill used in a boardroom without irony. I clicked it open, and there it was. Clause 7.12b, written in the kind of dry legalese that makes your eyelids sweat. In the event of an acquisition, merger, or change of control, the employee terminated without cause within 30 days shall trigger immediate vesting of all unvested equity units across all departments and levels. Furthermore, The board shall authorize severance multipliers to equal or exceed the accrued value of vested units. One sentence. One neutron star of liability. The clause was likely meant to protect early execs from being gutted in a hostile takeover, but nobody ever cleaned it out, because nobody expected anyone to remember it, and nobody expected someone like me to find it. I didn't report it. I didn't even print it. I relocated it. You see, the true art of vengeance isn't in the explosion, it's in the wiring, the placement, the patience. During the next monthly HR policy review, I logged a revision request under the Compliance Change Form 9C2, one of those back-end forms no one reads unless there's an audit or lawsuit. I attached the clause, reworded just enough to look like a routine update, and flagged it as per Legacy Integration Protocol, Ref. 2013 acquisition. I saved it to the server with a fresh timestamp. Then I renamed the file Appendix C Financial Risk Memo PDF. Same name, same bomb. New fuse, nobody noticed. Not HR, not legal. Not the infant VPs who thought corporate governance meant a Slack emoji policy. From there, I mapped the rest of the system like a burglar casing a mansion. I traced the clause's triggers through the employee equity system, HR termination flows, and legacy vesting protocols. I even tested a dummy run through the sandbox server and watched the numbers light up like Christmas morning. It was all still active. Waiting. I backed up the file to 3 places. One in the official archive. One in my encrypted cloud drive. One on a USB stick shaped like a golden retriever, gift from my niece, now storing the most expensive middle finger in corporate history. Then just to be cute, I logged a comment in the PDF metadata, updated by D. Mallory per internal review, not flashy, just a fingerprint, enough to haunt someone later. By the end of that week, I'd stopped surviving. I was planning. It descended on the company like a gender-neutral plague in pastel polos and wireless earbuds. The new leadership team, which looked more like a startup internship experiment than a Fortune 500 executive board, showed up the Monday after the acquisition with tote bags that said hustle and flow, and LinkedIn smiles you could smell through the firewall. The ringleader was a guy named Braxton, of course. Not Mr. Braxton, just Braxton, because titles were a colonial construct, according to his onboarding memo, which also included an inspirational quote from Elon Musk and a Canva graphic of a unicorn vomiting cash. Braxton had a man bun and a sleeve tattoo of startup milestones, including a QR code that linked to his personal Medium blog. His handshake was limp, but his voice carried like a TED talk no one asked for. "We're not here to tear down the culture," he said at the town hall, standing on the breakroom countertop for dramatic effect. "We're here to elevate it." By Wednesday, HR had replaced the mission statement with a slogan: "Legacy is just another word for outdated." Printed in bold Helvetica over the bathroom mirrors, right where your dignity used to live. Then came the culture blitz. Ping-pong tables in the cafeteria. A kombucha tap in legal. Mandatory gratitude journaling on Fridays. It rebranded layoffs as career velocity enhancements. Jenny from procurement got walked out holding a succulent and a hug coupon. My title changed overnight from senior compliance officer to process whisperer. They removed my access to legacy finance folders I created, and reassigned my audit reports to a 26-year-old whose resume included interned with a podcast about cryptocurrency accountability. I watched it all from my desk, didn't raise my voice, didn't blink, just drank my coffee like it was a witness statement. "You should smile more," Braxton told me one day in the break room. He was wearing joggers with a blazer and typing on a foldable Bluetooth keyboard. "You've got, like, powerful Ruth Bader Ginsburg vibes." "Thanks," I said, deadpan. "She's dead." He blinked, laughed nervously, then offered me a yoga pass. It was clear I was being phased out. I got uninvited from budget meetings. My calendar got mysteriously wiped. IT accidentally reset my login credentials 3 times in 1 week. And when I tried to pull policy documentation, I got the error message: "You do not have permission to access this content. Contact your administrator." I was the administrator. The kicker? They installed a foosball table in what used to be the compliance review office. I walked past it every morning like a graveyard. Every time the ball clacked, I imagined it was another unvested stock option hurtling toward bankruptcy. But I kept showing up, kept logging in, kept smiling just enough to stay invisible, because they thought they'd neutered me. What they didn't know was that the clause they couldn't see, buried in the bones of the system, was still there, alive, and it was hungry. They were tightening the noose. But the rope, I tied that 6 months ago, and every pastel-wrapped decision they made was one more twist. Quiet ones always get mistaken for powerless. That's the magic trick. While the pastel warlords played hacky sack with middle management careers, I spent my evenings in the one room they hadn't vandalized yet, Archive 6B, smelled like printer dust and old toner, my cathedral, my armory. I wasn't just reviewing documents. I was verifying a detonation pathway. First, I pulled up the policy systems directory, mapped the exact access nodes, legacy linkages, and conditional triggers for HR termination flows. The clause I'd reinserted months ago, it was still live, still registered in the HRIS system's change history. Still tagged per compliance continuity protocol, corporate code for don't touch this unless you want to end up in a Senate hearing. Then I ran a breadcrumb check. Every system interaction left a trail. Who uploaded what, when, where it flowed next. I followed the audit trail like a bloodhound, confirming that the clause had successfully propagated into the severance payout script, buried inside one of the oldest auto-generated templates used for involuntary terminations. Specifically, termination type for C, without cause, post-structural realignment. Bingo, but I wasn't done yet. I needed confirmation, so I called in a favor. Amy Caldera, Harvard Law, ex-SEC enforcement. How does boutique contract law from a brownstone in Georgetown with the quiet fury of a woman who once got sued for being too thorough? I sent her the clause. No fluff. Just the text, the placement, the trigger conditions. She called me 20 minutes later. Jesus Christ, Diane, where did you find this? Same place you find mold beneath everything shiny. She laughed once sharp. It's airtight. If it lives in the severance packet, even one copy, it's enforceable. And if it goes to legal, they're obligated to initiate clause protocol unless they want exposure. And if I'm fired, it triggers the clause. If they don't act, you can sue. If they do act, they're screwed anyway. Perfect, I said and hung up. Then I printed 3 copies. Laser printer, no color. I signed one in blue ink, just in case someone wanted to get cute with authenticity later. 1 copy went in my safe at home. 1 went into a red folder labeled meeting notes and slid into the bottom of my bag. The third? That one lived digitally. Encrypted and embedded into a timed message, an email addressed to the CFO, head of legal, the head of HR, and 3 internal communications officers who handled investor relations. I didn't forget the internal press desk either. There's always one disillusioned comms guy who dreams of being a whistleblower. I made his job easy. Subject line, urgent. Legacy Clause Activation Compliance Memo 7.12b message body was 3 lines. As per protocol outlined in Appendix C Financial Risk Memo, this serves as formal notice of activation due to involuntary termination without cause under acquisition terms. Attached documentation confirms policy linkage and compliance integrity. Attachment 1 PDF. The real brilliance? The email was set to delay send. Trigger time 9:01 a.m. Date TBD. Contingency. Cancel manually by 8:59 a.m. or let it fly. My kill switch. All I had to do was nothing. In a world of fast talkers and backstabbers, the most dangerous weapon is patience. And I'd sharpened mine into a blade. The clause was loaded. The fuse was set. Now all that was left was for someone to be stupid enough to pull the trigger. The espresso hit my tongue at 8:59 a.m. Smooth and bitter, like closure filtered through a stainless steel portafilter. I sat outside the glass-walled cafe across from Swiftspan HQ, sunlight bouncing off the windows like the universe was winking at me. I didn't bring my laptop. I didn't need it. My hands rested around the ceramic cup like I was warming them over the final campfire of a long war. At 9:01 a.m., the email sent itself. No fireworks, no Mission Impossible music, just a silent click in a distant server room and the soft gasp of a backdoor awakening. They'd planned to erase me from the system by 10 a.m. I got there first. Inside, the systems began chewing through the clause's logic like it was breakfast. HRIS pinged the compliance server, which pinged the stock compensation portal, which flipped a dusty internal flag marked. Trigger, Mass Vesting Clause 7.12b. By 9:03 a.m., the equity management system had pushed out over 200 internal notices. Congratulations, your RSUs have vested in full as of today's effective date. Please note, accelerated vesting has been triggered under Legacy Clause Protocol. It was subtle at first. 1 Slack notification, then another, then 5, then 50. Anyone else just get a stock notice? Why did it say I vested? I didn't even apply for early exit. Is this a glitch? At 9:06 a.m., the VP of Engineering's assistant walked into his office with a face like wet drywall and asked, "Did you authorize the compliance system to issue full equity vesting across your entire org?" He said no. That's when the finance team's alert started pinging. Unusual options activity. Internal RSU vesting volume exceeds threshold. Non-forecasted stock obligation detected. They thought it was a bug. A blip. Some junior engineer drunk on Red Bull who pushed bad code into prod. Then they opened the attached file. Appendix C Financial Risk Memo PDF timestamped. Legally signed. Logged into the HR severance packet database 2 months prior. Metadata, updated by D. Mallory. By 9:15 a.m., the panic reached legal. I imagined some poor junior counsel with 3 hours of sleep and a corporate wellness badge getting blindsided mid-bite of his protein bar. He'd read the clause, check it against the protocol tree, realize what it meant. Then he'd scream. All the while, I sat under a sun umbrella, sipping the last of my espresso like I had nowhere to be and nothing left to lose. A woman in a pencil skirt rushed past on her phone, speaking in that corporate staccato panic. "No, I don't know why it's firing. Check the legacy compliance log." I said, "Check it." A Slack thread leaked to my phone via a burner Discord from a friend still inside. #urgent finance ops who authorized 200 plus vestings. Who the hell is D? Mallory, is this a joke? There's a PDF in the legal folder called Appendix C. Why is this sign the cracks had started? And I said nothing. Didn't post. Didn't gloat. Didn't even smirk. Just watched as the carefully constructed image of post-acquisition control began to tear at the seams, one clause at a time. The detonator had gone off. But the real explosion? That was still crawling up the pipeline, and I wanted a front row seat when it finally blew. The meltdown began, appropriately enough, with a Zoom call titled Urgent, Unexplained Equity Trigger. I wasn't in the meeting, but I heard all about it. The transcript got leaked by someone in accounting who still owed me lunch and a favor. Fair trade. CFO Gerald Beam, 5-time firer of redundant assets, 3-time recipient of Forbes' most forgettable smile, was already sweating before he joined the call. His video flicked on to reveal a man in business pajamas and panic. His background was fake, a minimalist office scene with a succulent and framed MBA, but his face was very real. And very pale. Okay, he began, throat clearing, glasses fogging. Let's get alignment here. Alignment. The corporate version of grabbing a mop while the boat sinks. The VP of product, a guy named Lane who wore Patagonia vests like body armor, chimed in first. Half my org just got congratulations emails from the RSU system. It's saying full vesting. No terminations, no transfers, just boom, everything unlocked, a beat. Then someone else, same here. My whole data team's equity just matured. Compliance alerts went out. This isn't a phishing thing, is it? Then the real bomb dropped. Legal. A young associate popped in breathless. We found something. The vesting trigger was tripped by a clause in a file labeled Appendix C Financial Risk Memo. It was updated recently. Metadata shows it was touched during a compliance review. Who touched it? Beam snapped. The kid's eyes flicked off screen, probably reading from an audit log. Dated by D. Mallory. Silence, you could feel it. That name, my name, hung in the air like cigarette smoke in a church. Beam muted for a second. You know that silence. The kind where someone's throwing things just off camera. Meanwhile, legal's Slack thread was already imploding. Another leak hit my burner account, #compliance WTF who enabled the old severance package. Is this a breach? Why is there a hard-coded trigger? Who is D? Mallory, and why is her name on everything? Wasn't she let go this morning? Finance tried to stop it. They opened the ledger, tried to cancel the RSU triggers retroactively. But it was too late. The ledger had already logged the vestings as cleared and posted. Notifications had gone out. Transactions processed. In some cases, employee dashboards already showed the updated dollar values. Undoing that would require consent. Good luck getting that from 200 employees who just made the equivalent of a down payment on a lake house. They flagged the servers, shut down equity batch processors, pulled up logs dating back a decade. Still couldn't figure out how the clause bypassed modern compliance filters. Meanwhile, I was biting into a ham quassa across the street, watching the building like it owed me money. Every minute, another alert, another Slack leak. Someone found the signed PDF in the HR archive. Time-stamped, initialed, legally embedded in the system by me under a Form ID still active in the audit logs. Not a bug, not a hack, just good old-fashioned policy. And I knew what they'd do next. They'd try to spin it, try to isolate it, but it was too late. Their choke points, the systems they thought they controlled, the people they thought were loyal, the documents they forgot to read had collapsed. I didn't need to raise my voice. My signature had done all the screaming. By 10:17 a.m., the boardroom was on fire, figuratively, though I wouldn't have minded literal flames licking the drywall. The emergency call was unlisted, unrecorded, and allegedly off the books. But nothing inside SwiftSpan ever stayed secret long, not when the building leaked more than its water pipes. 10 board members, 1 CFO, 0 answers. The acquisition, which had been heralded just last week as lean and visionary, had suddenly bloated by $27 million. That's not a rounding error. That's not oops. That's you just accidentally funded a small hospital-level bad. Most of it came from mass RSU conversions, over 200 employees now legally vested, with shares hitting the books at full valuation. Number danced across internal reports like a ghost with a calculator. $27,403,881.42. They tried to claim data anomaly, but the ledgers weren't anomalous. They were pristine. Every equity trigger tied to a legal clause no one in that room remembered authorizing. A clause that now looked suspiciously like corporate sabotage wrapped in old compliance code. They brought in risk, brought in legal. They even brought in some poor intern from investor relations who looked like he hadn't slept since the press release dropped. One board member, a woman with 3 hyphenated last names and a yacht named after herself, leaned into the camera and spat, "Who the hell is Diane Mallory?" Another replied she was terminated this morning. A pause. The CFO cleared his throat. She authored the policy file, signed it, cross-referenced it during a compliance audit. System logged it as protocol. We failed to rescind it after the acquisition finalized. Investor chatter started leaking to Twitter around 10:22. At Equity Watchdog, police car light hearing whispers of a post-acquisition clause bomb inside SwiftSpan. Sources say mass RSU triggers just cost them 8 figures. Developing #SwiftSpan #Corp governance #clause gate at merger mouth. Fun fact, SwiftSpan's compliance officer was let go this AM. Clause she filed 6 months ago now wrecking their cap table. Chess, not checkers. Brain, and then my phone buzzed. A voicemail from Emily. She was my mentee once. Came to me fresh out of college, nervous, eager, brilliant in a quiet way. I'd taught her everything: how to write policies that read like riddles, how to document without exposing, how to smell fraud like it was burnt toast. She was still inside. I pressed play. Diane, hey, I don't know what's happening, but legal is freaking out. People are saying your name. Did you do something? Because if you did, holy shit, holy shit. There was a pause, a sigh, like she half wanted me to answer. To confirm the myth forming in the chaos, I hit delete, not out of malice, out of necessity, because I couldn't be part of this anymore, not even as a legend. They'd wanted to erase me, a ghost, a redundancy. Now, I was the clause that burned down their valuation, and I still had espresso on my breath. At exactly 11 o'clock a.m., the quarterly earnings call began, live, recorded, and translated into 3 languages for international investors. By then, the fuse had already curled to the charge, the sparks already dancing inside the walls. I was parked in a downtown cafe with velvet chairs and overpriced biscotti, watching the live stream on my tablet. The CEO's voice came through tinny but determined, like a man trying to hold in a scream while describing a sunrise. Today marks a new chapter for SwiftSpan, he began, oozing confidence through gritted teeth. We've successfully navigated our first post-acquisition quarter, with 8% YoY growth and positive forward momentum. His jaw looked like it was bench-pressing panic. They were trying to hold the line. I took a bite of biscotti and waited. 10 minutes in, a voice cut through the PR fog. It was Rachel Lefevre from MarketLine Financial, tenacious, well-informed, and famously allergic to bullshit. Can you comment, she asked coolly, on the sudden mass vesting event reported this morning, apparently triggered by a dormant severance clause? Silence. A flicker in the CEO's eye. Sound of someone unmuting and then instantly regretting it. I'm not sure I follow, Rachel, he said, a bit too fast. If there was such a thing, it would be immaterial. Rachel didn't blink. Reports indicate over 200 employee RSUs vested due to a policy clause embedded in an archived compliance file. The clause originated in 2013, but was recently refiled under the name D. Mallory, are you saying that's immaterial? You could hear someone inhale sharply in the background, probably the CFO trying not to vomit on a Bloomberg terminal. The CEO's lips curled like he'd bitten into a lemon and couldn't find a trash can. That document was not actively known to leadership. We are investigating its origin and legitimacy. Our systems, he didn't finish, because someone else leaked the file. Live, right into the investor chat window. PDF name, Appendix C Financial Risk Memo Caption. Clause 7.12b, updated by Diane Mallory. Triggered 200 plus RSU vestings. Enjoy. It was like dropping a lit match into a fireworks truck. Investor questions spiraled. Twitter erupted. At MKT snark, breaking, SwiftSpan just got nuked mid-call by a compliance clause. $27M in RSUs just poofed. The Mallory bomb at Equity Warrior. You mean to tell me a 52-year-old compliance officer they fired this morning buried a financial landmine 6 months ago? And it worked. Clause 7.12, Mallory bomb the stock price, which had been wobbling like a nervous deer, finally dropped to its knees. $48.90, $46.15, $42.00, $39.78. My biscotti snapped in half as I watched the number tick down like a countdown to irrelevance. The CEO stammered something about legacy risk protocols and a robust investigation, but no one was listening anymore. His voice had become background noise to the spectacle. I adjusted the brightness on my tablet, sipped my second espresso. They'd named it, the Mallory bomb, my name, trending. Not for scandal, not for shame, but for engineering the cleanest takedown in corporate memory without raising my voice or leaving my chair. I leaned back in the velvet seat, a storm of market volatility swirling on the screen like abstract art. I didn't need revenge. I had footnotes in history now. The email came at 2:03 p.m. Subject line, NDA rescinded SwiftSpan legal notice. Short, sterile, terrified. Miss Mallory, due to ongoing investigations and unforeseen legal vulnerabilities related to recent equity events, the company is rescinding its previously offered mutual non-disclosure agreement. Please consider all terms voided effective immediately. Translation, they couldn't afford to shut me up anymore. Not because I was loud, because everything I needed to say had already detonated in their earnings report. The media had already picked up the scent. Articles with titles like Clause that cracked the cap table and how one compliance officer outmaneuvered a billion-dollar acquisition were circulating. I skimmed the headlines, but I wasn't hungry for attention. My appetite had already been satisfied by the slow, delicious implosion of a system that thought it could outmaneuver its own architect. At 2:26 p.m., my phone buzzed once more. Amy, my lawyer, text they're trying to claw back vested equity, saying you manipulated policy for gain. But the digital trail's too clean, all within protocol. You're clear, congrats. I stared at the screen for a beat, then powered the phone off. Not airplane mode, off. I didn't need to hear from anyone else. Not the media, not HR. Not the comms officer who once asked if I could tone down the legalese in a fraud report. Not even Emily, who I knew would understand everything now without me saying a word. I was already on the interstate by then, windows down, sky wide and blue like a second chance, stretched thin across the horizon. My car, a 2011 Volvo with seat heaters and a glove box full of peppermint gum, rumbled steady beneath me like a warhorse who'd earned its retirement. City skyline in the rear view. That glass box of betrayal growing smaller and smaller until it became exactly what it always was, an overpriced cube filled with people who thought a ping-pong table could replace wisdom. The radio was off. I preferred the sound of wind. For the first time in 20 years, I didn't have a badge. I didn't have a title. I didn't have an inbox waiting to hemorrhage requests. What I did have was leverage turned to legend, an old clause resurrected into corporate folklore. A system that forgot who built it, reminded one signature at a time. I cracked the window a little more and let the air rush in, lifting strands of hair like they too had been waiting to exhale. I didn't burn the place down. I just handed them a lit match and watched them juggle gasoline. They thought I was a relic. Turns out I was a relic with a trigger. They handed me a pink slip. I handed them a financial obituary. Big thanks for watching, you sneaky seniors. Subscribe to keep the coffee pot brewing revenge. Your ex-colleagues won't know what hit 'em.